I believe in giving back time. I know it's hard, especially because it's towards the end, but if you've ever tried cases and you're in a jury and you trial and you get towards the end of trial, you're like, let's go, let's get to the jury, right? Let's give them back some more time. I'm very interactive. I don't know if any of y'all, number one, has anyone here been to one of my presentations the last couple of years here at PPA? Raise your hand. Good, yay, okay, awesome. How many of y'all are contractors? Raise your hand. All right. How many are public adjusters? How many are attorneys? Fabulous. Okay, good. Well, if any of y'all have heard me talk, I'm very unfiltered. I'm very unapologetic. I can be controversial, but it's all the truth at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is I might say some things that you're not going to agree with, you won't like. I've told Sean, I said, look, I'm sorry, you don't have to invite me back every year. I totally get it if you don't want me to be a certain way, but I only know one way to be, and that's because I've been in this business for 22 years. And when I mean that, I started first party work in law school, clerking, for a firm at the time that was very, very small. It was the Mostyn Law Firm out of Houston. We had 10 total people at that time. I was the first associate hired as a law clerk. I then graduated, got a job immediately before I even graduated. Steve hired me on. And we did mold, foundation, plumbing leak cases. We did cases when it wasn't sexy, when it wasn't fun, it wasn't the thing to do. Nobody knew what first party was at all in basically the state of Texas, except for the mold case that was the Ballard case back then. And the claims files we dealt with at the time were like 3,000 pages. Imagine that, getting a claims file that had 3,000 pages, because you had a plumbing report, a foundation report, an engineer report, an estimate, the claims file, everything. You had an IAQ report on mold, because back then, mold used to be covered in Texas under an ensuing loss provision. Foundation was covered at 100% back then in 2002 when I became a lawyer, all right, in first party. I practiced nothing but first party. I didn't do personal injury. I didn't do UIM. I didn't do mass torts. I went straight into first party out of law school, and I've been there ever since. Why am I telling you this? Because it matters. You know why? I've seen the institutional difference. I've seen policies that existed in 2002. I've seen the policies that exist today. Mold went away in 2005 because the Texas Supreme Court said it no longer exists under ensuing loss provision. It killed that practice. Same thing happened with foundation. Texas Supreme Court said, yeah, it's fine to have a 15% cap on foundation. So if you have a plumbing leak, it causes your foundation to crack and break, you are limited to 15% of your dwelling limit. Attorneys can't take that, right? It's not enough money. You can't take all the expenses from your client and your fee and leave them with zero. So it basically got that. Why am I saying this? Because I'm talking about trends and policies and why you should care. But I'm also going to say this because you're hearing a lot of different perspectives from lawyers and people that are going to take this stage, and they're good. They're good lawyers. I don't think they mean anything by it. But I'm going to be very clear. This state, this political environment that we are in, there shouldn't be any challenging of anything going to the Texas Supreme Court, nor any legislative body as it exists today. The reason is, if you look at history in first party, nothing goes your way as a policyholder in the state. Politics aside, I don't care about federal politics. I don't care what you vote on. But in Texas, it matters. And the problem here is, and we'll get there, when we talk about appraisal, I'm going to show you some old appraisal provisions. They were great. They were easy. They were simple. They were short, right? All these things. Now they're complicated. 3 pages, Oh, submit a statement of loss, submit a proof of loss, submit an estimate, outline your scope, outline your differences. Make sure it's this person, not that person as your appraiser. Make sure this, that. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to stand up here and tell you guys that there's going to be a good ruling out of the Supreme Court on appraisal in this state, because it's not. In fact, if you look at the body of case law, it's more on the insurance company side. They're going to take attorney's fees away, period, end of story, after appraisal is determined. I have the case listed here. You'll see it later on, and you'll see all the courts that are for it, all the courts that are against it. The case on appeal right now that Rick Daley talked about, that's their case. It's on appeal out of the 5th District. That's the first court of appeals case in state court on the issue. If it goes to the Supreme Court, likely not a good thing. And I know he knows that because he said if we don't win there, we'll go to the legislature. Well, we're going to go over the legislature. We're going to hit a slide on it. We're going to talk about what exists right now at the legislator level and what's passing, what's dead, and what's on hold. Because you know what? I have spent time in Austin. Over those 22 years, I have testified in front of insurance committees. I have testified when the TWIA bill was getting passed right in the middle of Ike litigation. Sean, you remember that well. Sean and I did Ike litigation together. I've tried cases down here in this courthouse for a month representing cities against Texas windstorm. Why would our legislative body give immunity to the biggest offender, bad faith culprit, actor, whatever you call it, back in 2011, right? I mean, if they committed bad faith on the grand level that they did, they got immunity because the legislative body doesn't care. It's the lobbyists. They don't care. They know where they have to vote in order to be elected again. So let's just be real. So what I say is different. When I started practicing the law, when Sean started practicing the law, we lived in the gray area. You know why? Because it's good to live in the gray area. You do not want black and white. You do not want a court telling you you can't get your fees, right? Or you have to do this, or too bad, so sad. Because as we challenge it and we think, oh, it's going to change, we are creating bad law for our clients. We are creating bad law that helps the insurance company. Look at the climate. Look at Louisiana. Look at Florida. How many of y'all practice in Florida and Louisiana? Okay. It's not good. So you know what? It's chess, not checkers. That's what it comes down to. So let's make sure we know that and we work together to not kill everything, to not hurt our clients, because at the bottom of all of this, what matters is what's best for the policyholder, period. That's what we have to do. Now, as I go through, there were a couple other things I hit on, and I wanted to say, because I've appreciated, Melanie, you saying this. Somebody asked, should we file TDI complaints? Yes. Yes. Don't. Yes. You know why? Let me give you a big picture, because this is really important. And you have to know this. You have to be in the business long enough to understand. You know what happens with those TDI complaints? You know. The legislature, that body that governs our state, what happens, that information, complaints that go to TDI on carriers is something that speaks to the legislature when they're deciding, are we going to allow that carrier to increase their premiums? Are we going to cap it at 10%? When there's a disaster and the carriers go, we have to be able to raise our premiums this year, government. Guess where they go to look? How many complaints you got? Do you have a lot of complaints? You know what else it's good about? TDI requires insurance companies to hold TDI complaint logs for 3 years. 3 years. As a lawyer, in my discovery, one of my questions that I go and ask in courts is I want the TDI complaint log for the last 3 years. And they have to send it to you. You know what it tells me? How many bad faith claims, how many contract claims, where it was, what's the location, all of it It shows me every single thing that I need, how many claims, everything but the name of the person and how to contact them. Why is that important? Why is it important to get a complaint log? Does anybody know? A pattern. Bad faith. You cannot get bad faith without showing a pattern, a motive. What is the pattern, right? Let me make this also clear. We represented a lot of clients in Hidalgo hailstorm claims back in 2013, 14, and 15. The hail bill that came out in 2017, the blue tarp bill, whatever you want to call it, we testified in insurance committees against this bill. We met with every single person on that committee to beg them not to pass this bill. Do not pass 542A. Do not pass, don't change it, because here's what's going on. You've got redlining, you've got demographic differences, you've got claims up north being handled differently than claims in the south. And you know why we were able to do that? Because we saw a pattern. We were able to show State Farm's pattern of denying 90% of Hidalgo claims in the Valley versus the Amarillo claims. We were able to show that one adjuster denied 100 claims, another adjuster only had 10. You know why? Because the adjuster that had 100 had a better, higher denial rate. We were able to drill down because we picked up on patterns. But here's my whole point. Did it matter? The hail bill still passed, right? So we got to live in today's world with the reality of what's going on today. So my presentation, I speak fast. I'm going to tell you the reality. I'm not going to sell you stuff. I'm not going to what is it? Sell at higher expectations, under deliver. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to talk about realities. The reality is so that you can make your own decision. The reality is 20 years ago, you had 3 forms. 3 forms. It was great. You didn't have to worry. If you didn't have a policy to look at as a lawyer or PA, you knew it was just one of 3. You didn't have to say, I got to get Farmers Next Gen, or is it the Smart Plan, or I don't know, is it this, is it that? I don't know, right? 3. That changed in 2003. It changed. Again, guess who passed the change? Yes, legislature. So now you have 300 forms, endorsements, exclusions, rate increases, higher deductibles, less coverage, right? That's what you have. You have less coverage for more money. You have endorsements. You have stuff that even lawyers have to sit down and read, and I promise you I've been reading policies, thousands, for 22 years, and I still have to stop and reread stuff. It is that hard, okay? Is it pro-carrier, pro-policyholder? Well, it's pro-carrier. I can remember, and I still have it in my office, a State Farm policy that existed in a case, the Riley suffrage case. I remember it. It's ingrained in my head. And in that policy, there actually used to be a statement that said, our duties after loss. What were the duties after loss of the carrier? The carrier's duty was to begin a reasonable investigation and to inspect the property. They actually adopted reasonable investigation out of the insurance code. So if you read 541, it talks about reasonable investigation. That was adopted into the actual contract, and they would have to inspect. You will not find that in any insurance policy. In fact, you won't find that they have to even inspect your client's house anymore. It's written out. So here are the changes, and then some of y'all have seen these before, but the point of all this is what we talk about TDI. TDI is not there to help the consumer, period, end of story in our practice. Still file the complaints. File the complaints because you're doing it for the litigation. You're doing it to help the client with bad faith. You're doing it to help the lawyer that you eventually go to get discovery from the court. That's why. You're doing it so that the legislation, when they go to legislature, say, we're great. We don't have any complaints against us. We're doing so well. They don't look at lawsuits. They look at complaints. Do it for those reasons. Here is why TDI is not doing anything. Every single policy is a file and use state we have. They file it, use it, file it, use it. Nobody is watching. Nobody. Nobody's watching, they're not changing it. Anything these carriers want, they take to Austin, they get it stamped, it's not even a big deal, probably because they're understaffed at TDI. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But at other things, they don't care. They're too busy investigating insurance fraud. They're too busy investigating public adjusters. They're too busy investigating lawyers. What will I tell you? Let me tell you a little story. I haven't shared this before. I'm going to share it to you all so you can understand this. In 2017, 2 investigators came and approached me from TDI to sit down and talk to me and said, will you come talk to us? Because if you don't, then we might have to have a grand jury talk to you. It's about your former boss. And I was like, what? Why would I talk to you? Unless you have a subpoena or something, I'm not talking to you. Well, you filed a lot of Hidalgo cases in the Valley on insurance companies. Y'all's firm had the most out of everybody besides a couple others. And we're just wondering what you did to vet it. Did y'all do your job? What was it for? And it pissed me off. You know why? I said, I'll show you. I'd be happy to sit down and show you all of my files with bad faith, my chart that shows State Farm and all the red bubbles that show where they denied, and my clients and how they picked on Hidalgo people and demographics versus others. Yeah, come sit down by me. We vet the hell out of our cases. Not only do we do intake, we look at their policies, we send an expert out, we take photos, we do a whole thing. I even get a driver's license, picture of my clients. Nothing came out of that. You know why? Because we did our jobs. But they came to ask us. You should be going and asking the adjuster who denied the claim, who got 100 files versus his other fellow people that got 10 because he was such a great denier of roofs, right? Go investigate them. But they're not. The reality is what Melanie said. The reality is they're coming after PAs, attorneys, and contractors, which leads me to another little thing that I just have to get off my chest. Why are we fighting each other? Okay? I will say this. I don't give a shit who you are. You can listen to this, and this is what I mean by this. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a public adjuster. I'm not a contractor. My cases come to me when they need a lawyer, when you've tried to figure it out, when you've handled it, when you've already gotten the undisputed money paid to the client, their money to in their pocket. You've tried to get the insurance company to change their mind. You've pled, you come out, re-inspect, here's an estimate, this is wrong, let's go do this. I am the last resort. That's where I want to be, in my lane, being the advocate. Because when you look at these cases from that standpoint and you actually try these cases, the jury wants to see that. They want to see that you exercised all things and tried to work it out. They want to see that you tried on your own, that you weren't radio silent, that you complained about their estimate, you got a counter estimate, you tried, and your last resort was hiring a lawyer. Because if that happens and they believe you, guess what? You're winning, and you're winning big. Because they're going to give you all your attorney's fees, which the carrier gets to pay. It doesn't come out of your client's portion, they pay it. They're going to give you interest, which guess what? Interest belongs to the policyholder, not to me, the lawyer, not to the PA. It's the policyholder. They'll give you that because you tried, okay? But here's another thing we have to not do. Nobody is perfect. And I know there's a lot of shit going around about MMA, and I'm not going to defend them, okay? They did what they did, but I don't believe in malice. I don't believe in kicking a dog when it's down. Move on, right? That's how I feel about it. You learn from it. They make mistakes. They have problems. There's issues that occurred. We're all seeing it. But we got to figure out a way to calm it down because it's going to affect our clients. It's going to affect your insureds. It's going to affect the laws. Shit is going to change for the worse. We're seeing it. There is information. They're going after lawyers. They're going after a witch hunt. They're going after public adjusters. They're going to your legislative bodies and saying, we've got to change the law because there's all these bad actors out here. They're taking the target off of them and they're putting it over here on us. And if we don't get our stuff together and we start working together, not taking from each other, not competing with each other, it's going to be bad. Because I've seen it before, and it wasn't bad. But you're seeing it now, and there's a lot that needs to be changed. So let's go through this real quick, because I am talking about other things, but I hope I'm going to ask you, y'all are going to ask questions. But here's what we're going to discuss, is the duties after loss and notice of claim. I told you this, duties after loss, to sum it up, the insured has more duties now than they've ever had before. Insurance carriers have less. You're insured, and this is where you're so helpful as a public adjuster and a contractor. Honestly, you've got to look at these things and say, okay, did we call the claim in? Is it timely? Because you'll have timely notice provisions that we're going to get to that talk about doing it within a year. That didn't exist, Sean. When we practiced law in the beginning, there wasn't a timeline. You didn't have a year to file your claim. They didn't have a limit. That was born out of case law, okay? Because somebody wanted to take case law, thought that they were going to get a good ruling, and guess what? You didn't. So it shuts the door. Once they rule and they say it's spoken, you are screwed. That's what happened. Endorsement and amendments, we have a ton of them nowadays. I mean, one of them in the back of the slide, the anti-public adjuster provision, the marring, cosmetic roof exclusions, appraisals, endorsement. I think I saw one that talked about ACB and roof depending on your age in a very complicated scenario. Yes. Duties after loss, proof of loss requirements. Make sure, I did see one the other day that had a PA's fee in the proof of loss. Don't do that. If you're going to do that, you want to have your proof of loss be very specific to your claim, to your estimate. Your PA fee, you can try and see if the carrier is going to pay it. They're not obligated in this state to pay it, right? It's not contractual that they have to pay it. But don't get yourself sideways with your client. And what I mean by that is misrepresenting things that get confusing later. If you stick your PA fee in the proof of loss and submit it to the carrier, your client signs it. You're also telling your client that that insurance company is going to pay my fee. If your contract doesn't say that, right? Clarify with your client, hey, I'm going to submit this. The carrier is really not obligated to pay my fee. If they do, great. But if they don't, you just need to understand. We have a contract that comes out of the proceeds, right? Just protect yourself. Prompt notice, you have a year. Basically, do not file a claim more than later than a year. I will tell you, juries hate those claims. They just do. They think, you know why? The people that had more damage called ASAP. The people that had less damage called late. It cuts your case. Unless you have, which we did have, we represented a client who was blind. Blind. Didn't know he had damage. And unfortunately, the adjuster was terrible about it too. And the adjuster, it was a good case at the end of the day because the client didn't know. The adjuster was completely misrepresenting to the client things, didn't even do his job. And it was a sad situation, right? But without the rarity, file your claim early. That's just to point out. Case law and prompt notice. You think it's pro-carrier or pro-policyholder? Thank you. That's the whole point. It's policy. It is carrier all day long. Insured's duties, read the policy. When I get down to this, read the policy. You have some, like Allstate, that require 60-day proof of loss automatically. Automatically. And in case law later, it gets harder because they will argue that you didn't comply with the policy, and then an attorney has to try to convince a court that that is immaterial and it didn't cause prejudice to the claim and it doesn't matter, right? So just read the policy. All of these are duties. Endorsements, again, read the policy. I do this because you're going to see marring in farmers. I look at farmers' cases a lot because I find them very interesting that they snuck in marring as opposed to cosmetic. You're not going to find the word cosmetic in any farmer's policy. I challenge you to find it. You won't. It's not there on purpose. It's not there because they wanted to go around the residential requirements on cosmetic roof exclusions, which requires a premium reduction and a signature from the insured. That never exists. I love cosmetic cases. I love them because you know what I sue for? Breach of contract, fraud in the non-disclosure, ambiguity in the contract, consequential damages, and I sue the agent. Because guess what? An agent shouldn't be selling a policy that doesn't cover a roof fully, right? That's what you do. The next one, all of these things. Man, exclusions, 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 exclusions. Everything's an exclusion. Eventually, there's basically no policy that's covered. This was a gem. Read your policy, because I had this in a Safeco case where they didn't want to replace a full tile roof. They wanted to use a molding out of Wisconsin or Missouri and have a mold done of the tile because it was discontinued, and then they wanted to use that. This provision that said damaged property with new materials of like kind and quality, this helped that case tremendously, because they can't use boneyard tiles, salvage tiles, the like. Anti-public adjuster provision in contracts. Here's an example. The great thing about this page, by the way, as I was looking, I was like, holy shit, excuse my language, that is not the worst thing on here. Look at all these other things, which are exclusions. I'm going to save you some things. Here's a good news for you, and right now there wasn't, so you know, when we get to the legislative update, public adjuster endorsements are not going to live in Texas. The bill will be passed that does not allow it. If there is a policy that has one, it will be void, okay? But look at the rest. An anti-assignment endorsement, a cosmetic damage to floors exclusion, mold, building permit and compliance endorsement. I mean, they're trying to get everything taken out in this one. And I'm gonna say this too, because some of y'all know from my prior speeches, I do not believe that you have to hate the other side and fight all the time with them. In other words, I do believe in keeping your enemies close, right? That's where I got this from. Make no means about it. Before I come here every time, I reach out to Stephen Badger and I say, hey, send me every single thing that your policy carriers are trying to get pushed in the legislation. Send me every single addendum, endorsement, I don't care, whatever that I need to tell everybody about. And you know what? Some people don't like that, right? Oh, why are we talking to people? Why are we allowing them a platform? Why are we doing this? You know why? Because we live in this state where people and the lobbyists on their side are very powerful. And I don't know if y'all remember, and you look in your history books, but in the times of America that was successful, both sides had to reach across the aisle to shake hands and fucking work it out, excuse my language, right? Make a compromise of some sort so that we could all survive. But I'm gonna say, I don't know if any of y'all remember last year the really controversial slide about the preferred vendor network. That came, I don't know. If I went all the way through here, and I am, in case some of y'all missed it, I talk about it because there's a lot of stuff on Facebook right now about why are we letting people do this? Why are we letting people do that? Why do we talk to the other side? You know why we talk to the other side? This. This was last year. This ART program vendors, preferred roofer vendor network. There are some people, attorneys, roofers, thought it'd be a good idea to get with Stephen Badger and the carriers to try to come up with an HMO for property, as in a preferred vendor network. We'd been there before, it happened to State Farm back in the day. They wanted to do another one, but they wanted to give premium reductions, forgive deductibles, get paid RCV up front, and all that commercial client had to do was agree to a policy where if they had a claim, they'd have to use a preferred vendor from the carrier's list to do their repairs. And I remember going through there and saying, what the hell is this? And it's an endorsement. It was sent by Badger to me. Here's the endorsement they wanted, right? They wanted to sell this around to get buy-in. And the reason was that's their PowerPoint. This is not my PowerPoint. That was a PowerPoint. Excessive appraisals, lawsuits, disputes over pricing and scope, proper fair risk estimates, amount of qualified contractors, payments. You'll get a level, the carrier wins by eliminating the need of a high percentage of appraisals disputes. It will keep unnecessary files off the table of attorneys and public adjusters while getting more files closed quicker. I was in shock. I mean, he literally sent me this. All of this, and that slide. Well, you know what? Thank God this is not in the policies right now. Because what y'all don't know is after this, we all hell broke loose, okay? I get a call. Chip gets a call. Everybody gets a call. Can we go meet? Can we go talk about it? It's really not a bad idea. We had a Zoom call. Everybody got on it. It's a bad idea because they were going to make 10% of every claim that went through the program. And I say this because I don't like things that are not the truth and out there, and I'm not afraid to say it because I've been doing it 22 years. And my point is, because we had the discussion, because it came here in front of y'all, because I have a relationship that is a professional, good relationship with the other side that benefits insureds across the table, this died. So I'm tired, frankly, of hearing about things. Why do we like the other side? Why do we want to hear them talk? Why do we care? Because it's chess, not checkers. You have to know where they're going to protect your client. And if you think you don't, you think you're going to bully yourself away and muscle yourself through, and they're just going to somehow give up, or you're going to be protected by the legislator or the Texas Supreme Court, you are wrong. Anyways, we'll go back, and I'll sum it up. I want to get to, and I have this PowerPoint, and I always share anything, so if y'all need it, I have no problem sharing PowerPoints. That's all another thing. So let's talk about appraisals. It's a mess, bottom line. It's a mess. I'm frankly tired of talking about appraisals. Are y'all tired of talking about appraisals? Anybody? Yes, right? Okay, I'm tired of it because we used to never talk about it. No one talked about appraisals pre-2009. Nobody talked about this. Nobody gave a crap about appraisals. Nobody cared. It didn't matter. It went through, it got done, it was paid, you got attorney's fees, you got depreciation. Before this last case came out on appraisal that's going on appeal, guess what? I was able, if we had an appraisal, I got paid depreciation up front, code upgrades up front, attorney's fees up front, penalties and interest up front. But guess what? Now that this case law comes, I get it shoved up my butt every time. Hey, well, I'm sorry, we would like to pay you, but this case law came out and I can't tell my carrier to do it because this case law came out and I only really owe you ACV and interest. And it's interest on how they calculate, not us. That's what makes it worse. And my hands are tied because they had a list of case law, right? And they do. This is it. This is the case that's on appeal in Dallas. It is a Daly and Black case. That's the one to go to Supreme Court for the state. In that exact one, here's what that court says, all in favor. These are all the cases in Texas that favor basically what the carrier's saying, that you don't get any fees after it's done. Those are the cases that are. You can see the difference here? So that's the federal courts. We know where they lie. And guess what? We're in federal court 90% of the time because that's what the legislative body did to us in 2017 when they passed the Hale bill. They allowed venue shopping by the carriers, basically. We didn't have that before then. So is it a good or a bad thing? It's a mess. Talk to a lawyer before you do anything because it is a freaking mess. And you need to protect yourself so you don't get in trouble. Here's the legislative update, because I'm going to skip to this. I know you'll want lunch. Guess who this came from? Yeah. Thankfully, right? Does it mean that we're friends? Does it mean that we roll over? Does it mean that he doesn't advocate for his client? Does it mean all my commercial cases I got, we don't advocate? No, it doesn't mean that at all, as a matter of fact. It actually helps my clients. It helps my clients because when he has to write a report, insurance defense lawyers have to write a report to their carrier in order to get authority to settle cases. How do you want to be represented in that report? As a PA? As an attorney, right? They got plenty of people to fight, right? They can't fight everybody. So they're going to pick and choose. They're going to fight people. They're going to fight people that don't know what the hell they're doing. and they're going to fight people that are going to be too arrogant to give up. That doesn't help the policyholder. But they're not going to fight the people that do the right thing, that is professional, that represent their clients, that have cases that they vet, have a great file that is documented correctly. And if you do fight, it's on an issue, a real issue that you want to take to the jury, okay? A real one. So here we are, the legislative update. Policy forms cannot prohibit retention of public adjusters. No, that's the non-anti-PA endorsement. It is on the table waiting for the governor to sign. It means it passed the Senate and the House. That's good. It's up to Abbott whether he signs it. It is believed he will sign it. And this was a bill that was supported by, I believe, Tapia and some others on both sides of the aisle to get passed. Number 2, no foreign arbitration with foreign choice of law requirements. This is another bill. These are the bills that dealt with commercial policies, and they would make you go to New York. I'm licensed in New York, but it'd make you go to New York and arbitrate your case, or use New York laws to arbitrate your case, or use Tennessee laws. This bill says you can't do that, right? In Texas. It would have to be in Texas. So that is waiting for the governor to sign. This bill was also done by compromise on both sides. That's why those two are the ones waiting to sign. Those are the two at the top, because there was actually compromise to both sides. The third one, require insurance companies to pay cost of appraisal awards higher than claim measure. It's dead. It's dead. That's a pro-consumer bill. It is dead. Make 542 violation of an insurer to compel an insured to hire a PA, and then insurer has to pay the PA commission. Dead. Because it's pro-consumer, right? Bill to legislate appraisal has gone through various versions to fix appraisal process abuse and establish timelines, but it was gutted and now only requires appraisal clause and policies. So that's about to pass, but the bill that started, that there were lawyers and people that negotiated back and forth on, that started bigger, but now it's basically just says that all residential auto policies will have an appraisal provision. That doesn't help anybody. What does it mean? Is it an appraisal provision that's a paragraph or 3 pages long? Doesn't talk about it. That's the problem with that. And on both sides, they're not happy with it on the other side either, because they think it's just a waste. What's the point, right? Another one, minor amendments to our must-pay deductible law. This is dead, likely dead, as passed Senate, but not moving in the House, okay? That's good. You know what that means? The Senate passed it, which the Senate's going to pass it. It's very conservative. But it didn't go through the House. It didn't get passed, okay? So that's talking about the fact of the whole, do you pay the deductible, who pays the deductible? Mandates that an insurer, the next one, mandates that an insurer may not take ACV depreciation of more than 20%. It passed the House, which is usually favorable, so you know, but it dies in the Senate, okay? And lastly, would preclude cosmetic damage endorsements in residential policies. It passed the House, but it's dying in the Senate. The whole point of this slide is to show you the odds of what the legislative body is going to do, okay? I want to give you time for your lunch. I skipped a lot of my presentation, but a lot of it has to do with cosmetic and things. I am always happy to share information. Anyone who knows me, you don't have to send me a case. It's not the way I roll in the sense. I'm happy to take one if y'all do, but I'm all about educating and making sure stuff is done right. I do believe that people that get in trouble are not malicious by nature. I'm talking law firms and others. I think it's a lack of information, education, and knowing what to do. So I am here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk to y'all. You can use those 2 things. One of them is my business card on the bottom. The other one at the top joins the Williams Hart mailing list, which is my mailing list. I do not send crazy mailers out about ridiculous stuff. You will only get a mailer out if there's something very important that is going to deal with your business or it's going to deal with your profession. I work at Williams Hart. I'm of counsel. One little last story. If anyone knows who John Eddie Williams is, he's one of the legendary tobacco company lawyers. He owns a big firm off of South Highway 45. He was my client back in Ike days. I'm of counsel to him. I represented him and his firm way back in Hurricane Ike on their building on a roof claim. It was successful later on. I've had the privilege of working in wonderful places. I now work as of counsel to John Eddie Williams and Williams Hart Law Firm. I do only first party, and I am happy to look at any file that you need. I do not sell you on expectations that are not correct. I do not underdeliver. I may not take every case you give me, but I will tell you why and your client, and you will know where you stand. Anyone have any questions? Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rene. All right, everybody, let's break for lunch.